I have a couple of charts that I just wanted to put on watch going into the end of the week, as these specific names could make very big moves, either for swing trades or for day trades. It's just a matter of how exactly they play out and if they give proper entries, because lately we've been having a lot of huge moves, but we haven't been getting a lot of good entries. Some things are just firing off at open, in which you basically got to buy in the first 5 to 10 minutes, or else you're missing majority of the moves. But these few names, I do think have the higher probability trades that are setting up, or at least they have the best potential to offer clean trades. So this first one that I have is going to be Palantir. I have the daily chart and the weekly chart. So this chart has been consolidating for quite some time right now. You can see the higher end of this range is about that 185.70, and then it's been building above the high of this bar, that 172.30. These two levels are going to be very key going forward. It's had a very strong uptrend, as you can see, even coming back. We had the big breakout down here back in May. We're now getting a little bit of a broadening formation on this daily chart. You can see we kept rejecting right here. And now what I'm looking for going forward is if we can get a break above today's high, essentially, that 182.30 area. If we can break above that and properly clear this 185.70, I'm looking for a move up into that new all-time high. This could be a day trade if it plays out properly, because if this actually does get that expansion to the upside, then on the weekly chart over here, you're going to see a breakout of the prior week's high as well. This is going to be a weekly engulfing. That weekly engulfing might be enough force to be able to bring this into that new all-time high, in which we can kind of target the top of this broadening formation. So if it happens on this day or this day, we're looking at about 196 to 198 area, all the way up until about that $200 mark. So this is the first name I want to keep on watch. There could be a potential swing trade here. Just have to be mindful. This week is OPEX, in which options expirations kind of get things to where they can pin and kind of go nowhere. They make big moves for the week of OPEX, but essentially they don't really go anywhere by the end of the week. So I am being mindful that this could stay stuck in this zone for the better part of the rest of the week, in which this name is going to set up again going into next week. So swing trades could still work, especially if you get a better entry down around these lows. So keep that in mind, but definitely keep this on watch, as there's a lot of room up, especially if this keeps holding. Now, the next chart that we have is going to be AMD right here. Last Monday, we got a gap up right here, in which it gapped right under the new all-time high. Of course, they did it that way to where you would have people expecting to get that breakout. Instead, it gets about a $20 sell-off on that day. The next day, we gapped up, and we've been making consistent higher lows on the daily chart since then. We've not taken out one of these daily lows, except for obviously right here where we made this doji kind of day. And although this is an obvious uptrend on the daily chart, the weekly, every single time frame, except for maybe if you go less than an hourly, this is kind of on an uptrend. But even with that being said, this is still starting to look like there could be distribution starting to kick in which there is a potential short trade on this. I personally think that this is still going to go way higher into year end, in which I'm targeting at minimum the 260s, basically up into that $300 mark. So still about an $80 plus move into end of year is possible on this. And of course, that's going to be relevant to if the market can hold as a whole. SPY and QQQ, if they start getting into bigger corrections with the rest of tech names, then obviously this isn't going to get that bigger upside expansion. It's still possible, it's just less likely. But these are the levels that I have going into the rest of the week. This is setting up this kind of daily bear flag. Again, this is obviously in a daily uptrend, but this could start to change in the next couple of days. There's a potential short trade that's brewing under the surface, in which under this 217.11, there's room down to 212.50, down into last week's lows. So basically under this 217's level, there's room all the way down to 203 to $200 mark. The 200.54 level is going to be very important, coming into the next week or so. And I do think that we trade that first before trading new all-time highs. It may not actually work out that way, but I would prefer this because if we start to pull back into this level down here, we start to build in this 194.31 to 200.54 range. We start to catch momentum and a bounce off of these levels after we get the short trade down there, then there's potential where we get something like this. We kind of pull back, get a bounce, the flush into last week low, and then we kind of just go sideways for maybe a couple of days before we get that bigger move up. So there is potential that this gets a breakdown of this bear flag, a nice clean flush for about a $17 to $20 plus move to the downside. And then it starts to get a reversal in the coming days after that happens. I'm looking to short this with either the weekly contracts, so maybe the 220 down to the 210 puts, in which if this gets that move, all of those strikes can essentially go 2 to 5x from their current prices. It would be even better if we try to hold this next time and then push up into this 225, take out these highs, fail off of this prior all-time high, in which you'll get a much better entry, and then we get that big decline. So we have the potential for a $15 to $20 short trade, and then a swing trade going into the following month, maybe 2 to 6 week out contracts. The next chart that I have on watch is going to be GS. This reported earnings today. Look at exactly where we held, the bottom of this trend zone, drawing it from here, connecting it to here, pulling it over, and we see that we held at the open and we found a bounce right off of this anchored VWAP from this high over here on July 3rd. Going forward into the rest of the week, I think this has the potential to make a pretty big move, even though it already made a pretty big move today, relatively speaking. This had a range of $44 intraday today, so there is still potential to make a similar type move into Friday. These are the levels that I have on this. I would mark these on your chart because over and under these specific levels, there is a big trade possible. I would mark these levels on your chart because if we get below that 756.61, there's room down to 732.80, over 785.82, we have room up into 800.65. Either way, there's a $15 to $25 plus move that's possible going into tomorrow, into the end of the week. And just look at where this is at on the daily chart. You have consecutive daily lower highs, and then you have these multiple higher lows that are trying to hold, in which this is a higher low relative to this. So there's a pretty big move coming. And in my opinion, basically, whichever way this breaks above today's high a day or today's low a day, that's going to be pretty telling because when that momentum comes above today's high or low, there's going to be pretty big moves that come. We have that pivot machine gun to the upside the same way as we did on the prior AMD chart. So there's a lot of room for this to move in the next couple of days. The next chart that I have is going to be UNH. This one is an inside week still. We're building weekly higher lows, daily higher lows. Look at where we are in this formation. We got a push above this high right over here. We came up and we filled some of this gap fill over here. And then we started to fade, and this happened to tie in with the big sell-off last week on Friday on this bar right here. Now it's building higher lows for the past 2 days. This is basically an inside bar, a double inside bar of this candle right here. And it's happening at this key anchored VWAP. This is tightening up for another big potential move. I'm thinking that this tries to go higher again first, kind of gets a move over today's high, and then we roll over and get that breakdown. And I do have a trade idea for either end. So if this breaks above 361.60, there's longs to these levels. And the same thing if this breaks under 354. So there's a short trade or a long trade basically in play tomorrow or the next day if we get outside of that range. So keep this on watch, mark the levels on your chart if you want. Either way that this plays out, there's another $5 to $15 move, and that could be a day trade or a swing trade. As of right now, I think the higher probability trade is probably to the downside based off the chart, but I'm fine with taking either one of the trades because they can pay very well, and these options move extremely well too. Another thing is if we get that breakdown under 354, that's going to occur with a weekly breakdown as well. And that breakdown under last week's low could also bring a lot of momentum on this name to where it can get like a $10 to $20 move. Honestly, we've already taken out the highs over here, and let me just draw this so you can see what I mean. You've already taken out the highs over here. There could be a potential broadening formation in play where we even try to come down and take out this low over here. So if that's the case, there's a much bigger short opportunity because that low is 332. We're at 359 right now. That's a $27 drop possible if it tries to build a broadening formation on this daily chart before it eventually goes much higher.